Samaria was not feeling too beautiful when she met Jesus. As a matter of fact, she should never have met Jesus because there were two things going against an encounter between her and this Messiah from Nazareth. Number one, Jews didn't have any dealings with Samaritans. Samaritans were considered second-class Jews. You didn't talk to them. And, more importantly, men did not talk to women they didn't know. But Jesus never let human constructs get in the way of making all things new.
A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who is saying it to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you the living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go call your husband and come back." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you say the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem?" Jesus said to her, "The hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and truth, for the Father seeks such as these to worship him." The woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." Just then his disciples came. They were astonished that he was speaking with a woman. But no one said, "What do you want?" or "Why are you speaking with her?" And then the woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, "Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?"
I like golf, bowling, softball, lifting weights, downhill skiing, and neuroscience. Doesn't seem to go, does it? But I am just fascinated by how the brain works. And I'm not the only one. If you look on the New York Times bestseller list for nonfiction, every so often there will be this book about brain theory and how this 3-pound mass inside our skulls operates. Here's one book that's been quite popular for a long time, The Happiness Hypothesis. I've referred to that from time to time by a professor of psychology in the University of Virginia. And he says that we essentially are controlled by our subconscious. We're not even aware of why we think what we think or feel what we feel. That the subconscious is like this huge elephant that is directing our life all the time, and we make irrational, unconscious, emotional decisions, and the little conscious part of our brains, like the rider on this elephant, coming up with rationale for why we say and do what we say and do. He goes on, this professor, Jonathan Haidt, he goes on to write another book that's titled The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And he said that we do not choose our politics or our religion. It's chosen for us by the way our brain is constructed and the little DNA knitting that goes on as we are created. He says that just as our personalities are somewhat set at birth, so are our attitudes, our values, and some of us tend toward the values of tradition and authority. We become conservative. Others drift toward the values of equality and justice, and we become liberal. And the liberals cannot understand why the conservatives just can't see things the way they see it, and vice versa. Hence, we have Washington, D.C. and Congress. Hence, we have flaming liberal social justice preachers, and we have the fundamentalists. And we just can't get along because we're set. We're predetermined in our genes, in our DNA. Another psychologist, neuroscience actually, David Eagleman wrote Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain. He said that we shouldn't be too hasty in judging other people because many of the actions that people do are ingrained in their brain and they don't have really control. The 15-year-old who joins in the looting in the Ferguson riots, well, 10 years later he might not have done it because the prefrontal cortex of our brain that controls our impulses, well, had he been 10 years older, he might not have gone along with the crowd. But since he did it out of no control of his own, we label him a criminal and will continue to do so for the rest of his life. Or the woman who is caught up in depression. Do we say that she's just self-absorbed? Do we understand that there are biological chemical processes in the brain that keep her trapped in depression? Or the student who makes poor grades, do we say that he's lazy? Or do we understand that there is a bio-neurological development in his brain that causes a certain type of learning disability and he can't help himself? We understand that we're not really in control of things. It's difficult to really judge because, well, we're imperfect ourselves. Those are two great psychologists and neuroscientists. Let me quote yet a third famous neuroscientist and psychologist, Lady Gaga, who wrote her popular song, I Was Born This Way. And that sums it all up. I'm born out of the dust of the earth, and unto dust I shall return, and it's all predetermined. So, with this background, this little trip down neuroscience lane, we are confronted with the frequently asked question that I'm going to deal with today in a subjectively objective way. The question of, do I have free will? And I'm going to say two things about it. Number one is what you see up there. I don't think we're born with free will. Can you hold a toddler accountable for his or her actions? Well, friends, there's always a toddler part of us, and there will be until we die. There are things that are simply set, and we cannot change. If you want proof of that, why don't we look at that woman that you heard Rita describe in the gospel lesson for today? We hear that this woman was married 5 times and is living with a man who is not her husband. I think it is safe to say that this woman did not exactly outlive 5 husbands. This woman, well, I would say she was divorced 5 times, and in that society, what was the grounds for divorce? Adultery. She played around. She couldn't help herself. She couldn't be content with one man. So she continued her escapades, even now living with someone without the sacredness of marriage, which was absolutely unheard of back then. My dad, born in the early decades of the last century, living through the Depression, would have used this term to describe this woman. She was a flutesy. As in, used in this sentence, Greggy, steer clear of flutesies. And can you imagine what it was like to be a flutesy, so to speak? The degradation, the sense that she had very, very, very low self-esteem, the sense that she was codependent and needed to go from one relationship to another, casting all sorts of baggage onto this other person to take care of her. She was trapped by herself, trapped without any way of getting out. And what does Jesus do? Does Jesus go up to her and say, you know, you are a flutesy? No. Without any judgment whatsoever, Jesus Christ goes up to her and just chats. Could I have a drink of water? Oh, they start talking. And he lets her know that he knows everything about her. All of her limitations, all of her sin, but he does not judge. Could it possibly be that the key to helping someone change his or her behavior is not to call that person names, not to put that person into judgment? Could that be the key? Well, it certainly was for that woman. Because that woman, you can just hear it in this long dialogue. You could just hear it that suddenly there was a different tone in her voice. She had gone into to the well there to draw the water because, as Pastor Stephanie said a few weeks ago in this passage, that she went during the day when no one else would be there because she knew what others would think of her. She went there, and this man did not steer clear, but engaged her in a conversation, and she knew right then that he believed in her. He was giving her a second chance. He was painting a picture of a future much brighter than her present or her past. She runs after the disciples get there. She runs, you can almost tell, she runs back to the town, to the very people who condemn her, and she said, there is a man who told me everything I ever did, and it wasn't pretty, and yet he didn't judge me. Could he really be the Messiah? She went from being bound by her past and her own limitations to the possibility of being free. And if you know what John said, John, when you read John's gospel, always has these tidbits of details. And there's one thing that he put in that's very striking. He said that she ran back to her village, leaving her old water pot, her old water jar. She left it there. Why? She didn't need it anymore. She no longer needed to drink from the old, stagnant, stale water of her past. The water of her own guilt, the water of her own limitations, her own failings, her own preconceived notions about herself that always began, I am just so fill in the blank. She didn't need that water anymore because she received the water of life, the living water. She received forgiveness and hope and a new direction, and she could be free from all that had bound her. No, we're not born with free will, that's my opinion, but definitely we grow in to free will because the Messiah at some time in our life will encounter us And when he encounters us without judging, we have the opportunity to make the choice to be free. I think being a Christian isn't so much, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, etc., etc. But I believe being a Christian is to be open throughout your lifetime to when you encounter Jesus Christ around a well on a hot day. Then you have an opportunity to change. You're an elderly woman who lived with a man 50 years, wonderful husband. He died, your life died. 6 months you stay in the house essentially, going out only for food or the newspaper. You didn't want to live anymore. One day, you go out, you get the paper, and you hear birds singing. And you see a squirrel dancing through the trees. You smell the aroma of spring flowers. And suddenly, you choose not to go back into that house, but to take a walk into new life. You see, in the front yard, the Messiah encountered you, and you left your old water jar right there. You have a conversation with your son or your daughter who's in her 20s now. It's a conversation you were afraid of, but you knew it was coming. You had that sense. And your child tells you that he or she is gay. What do? Suddenly, all sorts of opinions or thoughts you've had come onto the table because this is your child, your flesh and blood. And so you start wrestling with things that you wouldn't ordinarily have wrestled with because you were confident beforehand in what you thought. And you leave your water jar behind. You're with some friends. You're in your 20s at a bar. Of all places, it's a Bible study. But you're free to say what you think. And someone talks about this man Jesus in an encountering type of way, an intriguing way. And you are overwhelmed. And you decide right then and there that you're going to take him seriously and let him talk about changing you and your priorities. And as you leave that bar, you leave the old water jar behind. You're in this church, and you've always seen yourself as an introvert, very happy to be behind the scenes, counting numbers or figuring things out. Always, never a leader, always in the background. But for some reason, you feel Christ is calling you to be a greeter. You find yourself going out there out of your comfort zone, and you put a smile on, and you become an extrovert. You never thought you could. But you see, you were called to leave your water jar behind. It's fine to be an introvert, by the way. You can also be something against type when the Messiah meets you at your well. Friends, we grow into free will because we understand at the well when Jesus Christ, however he does it, encounters us and doesn't judge us, then you are able to leave a prejudice behind, alter an attitude, rearrange priorities, take a chance that you never thought you could. You can leave the old water jar behind, and you can start enjoying some living water. I love baptisms because they are symbolic, this water, of the cool, clean, clear water of life that God gives those little babies we put that water on. Anybody who feels that water and knows that they're cleansed and can start over. Pastor Stephanie baptized a toddler a few weeks ago. The toddler, I understood, then sat on this baptismal fountain and started playing in the water, splashing it. Why do we not enjoy the water that's clean and fun to play in? especially the water that Jesus Christ offers us? I don't know. Because maybe now, even in this service, you know that Jesus Christ does not condemn, but talks with you and invites you to change and to accept the offer of life. So friends, I'm simply going to end this sermon by baptizing a secular commercial, the tagline of it. Stay thirsty, my friends, for you shall discover the waters of life.